The Talk the Walk series is a production of the Boss Rush network of podcasts. Visit bossrush.net to listen to our podcast and read our articles, game reviews, and more. You can also follow us on Twitter at Boss Rush Network to stay up to date with our content. Thank you for listening.
Hello everybody, welcome to Talk the Walk here on Boss Rush Network. I'm your host, the enlightened, excited Eddie V. Joining me for this discussion, can't get that out for some reason, it's the celestial brush herself, Mr. Celeste Roberts.
Hi, happy Sunday. I'm so happy to be here again for another Talk the Walk.
Yes. And joining us are some special guests this time. She's the sophisticated Skylander herself, Mr. Stephanie.
Hi, Sunday Fun Day. Yes. I'm so excited to be on here. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And we have another zestful person here on the podcast. Of course, it's David Geisler from Another Zelda podcast. Hello.
Hi there, Ed. How are you?
I'm doing good. I had to think of the AZP. I'm like, okay, they are Another Zelda podcast. Oh, I should make the ZP something cool. Another zestful person. Yes, David. Yes. So, welcome.
You're very good with coming up with titles.
I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. I literally have to think when I hear people's names. It's like, okay, what can I do something like really exciting for their nicknames, and go ahead and just do some research and try some things.
So this, if I may, this. Thank you so much for having me on the show, but me being on the show is 100% organic. I literally saw Celeste tweet a thing about who wants to talk about Gris, and I enjoy Gris so much that as a fan, I reached out to Celeste and said, "Can I come on and talk?"
Yes. I tweeted it while I was at work, and then I think less than 3 minutes later, I get a text from David, Celeste, period. I want to talk about Gris, period.
Yeah. I think it's a very influential game. So thank you so much for indulging in me and allowing me to be here and talk about this very artful game.
Thank you, Stephanie. Any words? I didn't know you was coming on, but I'm so happy that you're here. Yes.
Oh yeah. I was supposed to do a Spartan race today, and I would rather be here. So.
Yes. So if everybody could see that we are talking about Gris, before we get into that, David, Stephanie, and Celeste are all from Another Zelda podcast that you guys definitely should be checking out their podcast. I think the new season is coming out soon, David, or is it?
We had episode 1 of season 4 came out about a week ago as of this recording, and I'm editing episode 2 right now. And we have a few of them in the queue, so we're back on the track here, and it's been really great. It's been very exciting we had a little bit of a break there between 3 and 4 because of some of the COVID stuff and everything else. It's really nice to kind of be like moving and grooving again, So yes, season 4 is out now.
We all got to meet in Chicago for the quiz show. And I could just say this, just hanging out with you, David, Stephanie, and Celeste, it would literally feel like Another Zelda podcast recording when we was at the table just discussing about Zelda. And I know we're going to get into go ahead, David.
Oh, so sorry. Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure to have you here. It was so great to meet you in person at the actual video game summit. But then, pardon me, you're absolutely right. To have us all hang out after I had a little barbecue the next day, just because I knew some of people were coming into town, and you were an absolute delight. I felt like the only that you would be on the show here today, and it would be Celeste and also Steph. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like I feel like I don't even feel like I'm getting on a show where I have to go be a guest and talk about a game. I feel like I'm hanging out with my friends today, and this is really great. So. I remember I walked past a table at the barbecue, and you, Ed, kind of hollered out. You said, David, which one's better, Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask? And I was like, ooh, well, here we go. We're getting into it.
I had to ask that. We're going to get into the discussion. Agree. I had to ask that because we did a Zelda ranking for Power Block. And some people feel that Majora's Mask is better than Ocarina. Not just but Ocarina's the classic. It was a good discussion, and so I had to go to the man himself and ask. I'm like, what are your thoughts? So
I had a very long answer, and we won't get into it now. But honestly, it made me realize that we really need to have you on officially on another Zelda podcast episode, Ed, because that conversation was thoroughly enjoyable.
Yes. Well, everybody, we are talking about Gris. Gris is a platform adventure game by Spanish developer Nomada Studio and published by Devolver Digital. The game was released for Nintendo Switch, Mac OS, and Microsoft Windows in December 2018, for iOS in August 2019, for PlayStation 4 in November 2019, and for Android in April 2020. The game has sold over 1 million copies. The game's title refers to the name of the protagonist as well as the Spanish word for the color gray. I remember seeing this trailer on Facebook and did not know what the game was about. All I seen was the animation, and I was just like, oh, I need to buy this. And when it said Nintendo Switch, the day that it dropped, I ran to my Switch and purchased the game. How about you guys? Celeste?
I had not heard of it until you mentioned that you wanted to cover it for Talk the Walk. So I have it on PS4.
I rebought it for PS4 too. Go ahead, David.
No, I'm sorry. I just said I rebought it on iOS just to give them more money because I liked it on Switch.
Well, David, when did you buy it? How did you find out about the game?
I got a Switch late. I actually only got a Switch about a year ago. And so I was missing out on a lot of the like Celeste and a lot of these kind of 2D artsy games that were coming out, Hollow Knight, all that stuff. Even Cuphead way back, So there was a couple of years there where I was really kind of missing out on the indie scene. And I was aware of Gris, and I had watched a couple like YouTube videos. Game Maker's Toolkit, I think, did an episode on it. And I was kind of obsessed with this game before I even ever played it because it seemed the thing that really attracted me to it was this blurring of level design and experience. And even just looking at trailers, it was very clear that was going to be the case. Something like a Mario game, it's very clear what you can jump on and what you can't jump on, and you just kind of do it. And I think that Gris was kind of blending that line a little bit, and in my opinion, for the better. But so when I got my Switch for my birthday 2 Aprils ago, I immediately purchased a Link's Awakening, because that's about when Link's Awakening came out. But then my first digital purchase was Gris on the Nintendo store, and I played through it over the course of about a week. I kind of did it in chunks, even though it's not a very long game. I'd play for an hour a night and then kind of put it down, and by the end of the week I'd gotten through it, and I was moved. I teared up at certain times. I was very moved by this game.
What about you, Stephanie? How did you find out about Gris?
Similar beginnings like David, where I got my Switch launch day just because of Breath of the Wild, but I was very late to the indie scene, which is kind of weird because now I'm all about indie and Zelda. And I first heard about Gris when people were talking about it on Boss Rush podcast. Like someone would randomly bring up Gris. I'm like, what is this? Gris? Gris? What is this? And it also made our Boss Rush bucket list. And finally, I'm like, okay, I have to check it out because everyone else is saying how great it is. So I looked into it, didn't know much about it, but I did really appreciate the art style. Mm-hmm. And so as soon as I heard, I already bought it and it was on my backlog, but I bumped it up my list when I heard you guys were going to do Talk the Walk for it.
Yeah, that animation. This is the one game that I actually want Sony to take their art style and do a game with it. Like, after I got done playing with Gris, I was just like, Santa Monica, the people who developed God of War, take this art style and make a God of War game. Because this would fit it. This hand-drawn animation, and we're going to get into this game. Because, man, I know we got different opinions, but, man, just... For a debut game from Nomada Studio like this, it's been a long time since I've seen a game done this way, where everybody was just like I was it was hard for me not to give it Game of the Year. Like, I struggled because I was just like, this should be my Game of the Year, but something else took over for that year. Because, man, this is probably one of the, I think, all-time classics of an indie game. Like, it's up there with Shovel Knight and for some people, Rocket League and stuff like that. I think this is probably one of the best indie games to come out this generation, but we're going to get into that later. We're going to jump into quickly. The game follows a girl named Gris who wakes up in the palm of a crumbling statue of a woman. She attempts to sing out but quickly becomes choked up and the statue hands crumbles, dropping her to the colorless earth below. After landing, the girl continues walking forward and discovers a number of strange structures that seem to be powered by mysterious points of light resembling stars. The girl could collect these lights to gain new abilities such as turning into a block of stone and creating new pathways made of constellations. Instead of the game to be a mix of Journey and Ori the Blind Forest, the game was designed with accessibility in mind. As such, there are no fail states, a decision that proved to be challenging. So, let's tackle that, because the game is actually dealing about grief. It seems, and a lot of interpretation has been talked about that. As you see Gris waking up and she's about to sing, and she starts holding a voice that she can't, and she drops and stuff starts to crumble. She runs to the side of a face that we don't know yet, and it all falls down, like blows up and explodes, and she falls down. While she's falling down, the credits roll, and when she lands in a position of sadness. What did you guys take away from the intro? Celeste, I'm gonna start with you.
Okay, this is really sad, and it's kind of funny. I didn't realize that my boyfriend's headset was still attached. It was still connected. Mm-hmm. So I thought the first 10 minutes of the game were absolute silence.
Oh, wow.
So I was actually thinking, this is a really cool idea to start off the game in absolute silence.
So artsy. It's such a bold move.
But then he came into the living room and he said, let me unhook my headset, and then I heard the music. But I thought I was actually kind of moved by that. Wow, what kind of game am I getting into? I loved, of course, the gray, the lack of color. I could tell this. I had a feeling based on the picture, the thumbnail for the game, that we'd be filling in colors, kind of like a coloring book or painting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because the only color that you actually get in the beginning, besides the black and white, is the blue of Gris' hair. That's the only color that is in the beginning, with the gray. Stephanie, what did you think about the intro?
Oh, I really loved it. I felt it was a very creative intro. They don't have the standard, not that there's anything wrong with it. With most games, when you boot it up, it has, the name of the developer, the publisher, and then start the game. Whereas here, you get kind of like a cold open, and then you get to see credit. I appreciate, and I'm more willing to pay more attention to the credits more so that way. It is, for me, it was pretty obvious this was going to be a game dealing with grief. However, like art in a museum, it already left it very open to interpretation. Like, what kind of loss is this person experiencing? Like, now I got to think, this must be, is it a metaphorical or literal? So it just really got, my neurons firing and trying to figure out how I wanted to interpret it.
Yes. Before I get to you, David, it had a Japanime or anime kind of style to it. The explosion and the way that it was, I was just like, this takes me back to the 80s in a sense, like Akira and stuff like this. How everything, like every frame mattered, just an explosion. And then looking at Gris, I'm just like, this is hand drawn. That's crazy that this is hand drawn, and it reminded me of that. David, what you think of the intro?
So my only exposure to Gris was more like game mechanics and maybe how the game was made. Like I said, I watched a couple of YouTube videos about some of the mechanics. I had no idea what the narrative was about at all when I started playing it, and I truly had no idea what I was going to be dealing with. And then she loses her voice, and the little animation that happens in the beginning, and she starts falling, and it really didn't click for me. I mean, I thought it was very beautiful, and I thought, okay, this is cool, but you really don't know. Is this a person? Is this a god? Is this a spirit? Is this what are we dealing with? And then when she finally lands, and her dress saves her, and she lands safely, and you can't even. And the credits were fine. I thought the credits were tastefully done. With the fall. It's kind of one of those things where I can't help but remember the opening credits to Back to the Future 3 when we're flying through the clouds and there's just like credit after credit after credit. And I remember as a kid, I was like, come on, I'm so bored. I'm so bored. Let's get to the time travel already. But I had for just a split second, I had that kind of reaction where I was like, okay, we get it. These are the credits. But then I thought, well, let's be in this. This is obviously a studio that's creating a game where, you said every frame matters. And I also feel like, to piggyback off that, every second matters in this game. Every second of experience, the amount of time it takes to go from one place to another, I think is emotionally important in this game. And I think that is actually part of the game design and even part of the level design. So I kind of said, okay, I'll take the credits. Let's just experience it. I think you can kind of control her back and forth a little as you fall. I don't even know if it matters. And then when she landed, where I was really struck, and maybe this leads us into our next part of the conversation, I loved that there was, so anyone who plays a video game or plays video games enough, the first thing you do in the first level is you start pushing all your buttons and you kind of start figuring out, okay, this does this does that, this does this does that. And there's a lot of buttons that didn't do anything. And there was one button that made her like almost not choke, but like try to express, but she couldn't. Yeah, there's basically this like sing button. You don't even know what that means yet. You don't really know that that's a sing button until halfway through the game, which is a beautiful moment for me. But even like the jump button, what you start to, everybody kind of assumes B is the jump button. But even that, she trips and falls and she can't even move. And it was at that moment that I was like, oh, we might be dealing with depression or something. Like maybe, so then I started to realize that in the opening animation, that her losing her voice for me was a metaphor for just, one, just losing their confidence. And sometimes they get into a funk and they don't even know why, and it doesn't matter why. I mean, maybe it does if you go see a therapist and you want to like attach yourself to certain things. But as far as this story is concerned, it does stay as metaphor. She loses it. Maybe that statue's her ego or whatever it is. It crumbles and we're down and we're back to nothing. And that's when I realized that this was going to be a really special game.
Yeah. It was actually intentional. So,
I'm sure.
Yes,
of course.
because when she fell down, that's why when you are going forward, she walks slow. She's in her depression. She's in her grief. All of that was intentional. Because when you stop and realize she starts catching up speed, that's when you actually can take control of the character to jump and everything. So everything they wanted you to feel the impact of her falling into this level of grief with it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ed. There's a solid 15 seconds where all you can really do is walk to the right, and all you can really do is walk slowly. And again, it's one of those things where maybe you just got done playing some other game, maybe you just got done having lunch in the real world, but it helps us focus in on this game. It really helps us bring us in. It's a little bit like being at an open mic or something, like, where there's a bunch of poetry read or something. Like, you need those 10 minutes to kind of come into it, and I think that's exactly what they were trying to do with this experience.
What was interesting about this, that I was watching the video and did not even pay attention. If you drop down from the beginning and you go left, you see all the hands and everything that fell, and she falls down to it in sadness. And I'm like, I've never thought about doing a Metroid thing of going left. My thing was just like, she's walking slow, and I just want to go for it, because you cannot really backtrack in this game. You are in that one particular section. If you miss something, that's it. You gotta restart the whole chapter, or you gotta replay the whole game about that. So as Gris continues to go on, I love the part that she's in this white and black mood, and then at one point she just levels up. She looks like she's crying, and then she expresses herself, and all the game does is turn to red with this beautiful different shades of red and stuff. I do like at the one part that she falls down and she's just sliding, and while she is like sliding, the music is playing, and it feels like you see the red background and you see her just sliding on this black hill. So it's this black shadow that's going down in front of this red background. And it's just like, that is a cinematic moment that you see and don't even realize that. But the red's kind of representing her anger in a sense. So we are in the red section. What did you guys think of this whole section just in general? Stephanie, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, thanks. Actually, just to kick that off, we're now touching on the 5 stages of grief. Before you entered the red desert area, did you stop in front of the statue to get the achievement of denial at all?
I think so. I want to say is it the...
Steph, maybe I did it, but maybe I didn't recognize that it was a metaphor for denial. Can you speak to it a little bit?
Well, I missed it too, and it was only later in the game when I achieved, I don't know, I think it was depression, and says, it's 5 stages or whatever stage of grief, depression. I'm like, wait a minute, I missed anger and I missed denial. What happened? So when doing research for the show, it's, I wrote down here, you need to pause in front of the statue to get the denial challenge, but you need to stand there for like 10 seconds or around there. And I'm like, I don't know who's going to really do that. So, like, just personally, I was kind of, kicking myself. Like, I want to get all the 5 stages of grief. Like, I want to do that. But I don't know. I want to explore. I'm going left. I'm going right. If I'm going to the left and the statue's blocking the way, okay, I'm going to turn around. I would not think to just stand there and do nothing for 5, heck, even 10 seconds. So, okay. I'll move on from that little.
No, that's interesting. It's good that you mentioned that because I think playing it on Switch and playing on PlayStation gives you 2 different versions in a sense. Because you don't get achievements or anything on the Switch version. You're just playing the game. If you go to the PlayStation version, you are getting trophies for certain things. And I think that... I don't think that it makes the game longer. I think it makes you like actually realize some things that you may have missed if you bought the game again and stuff.
Yeah, if I may, I want to mention this because as you guys were talking about unlocking parts of grief, I was really confused because I did play this on the Switch, and I thought there was never a single moment in this game ever that has a word that speaks about the different stages of grief. For me, it was all metaphor. There was no literal like unlocking of anything. You had to just feel what red meant. You had to feel what blue meant. And I realized that you guys are talking about like operating system achievements being unlocked from the PlayStation version. Is that what you're talking about?
I actually am not, but Ed is right. Like PlayStation does have trophies, and I'm kind of curious. Maybe someone can comment after the show, like if the PlayStation trophies are the same as in-game, because I played on Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
And
really, I never saw any
it just
words.
like when I got to depression, like I was in front of a statue and it just blinks in the top right hand corner, stage of grief, depression, then it disappeared again. And if you look at your objectives, it kind of tells you what you've accomplished, including whether or not.
How do you look at your I'm so sorry. I'm like enthralled right now. How do you look at your objectives? Do you pause or something?
I can look it up on my Switch, like when one of LCL is talking. No, because I really want to explain it because I only discovered that halfway through the game.
Oh wow!
I think I
didn't
ever went
even
into
realize
a pause
that
menu or anything.
Oh, you know what, Stephanie? I don't think I got denial. I think I got depression later. I don't think I got the first one. And I had the same reaction you did. What? I'm missing some stages of grief here.
Yeah, because
this is weird.
There are parts in the game that you collect these lights called mementos, and they are going to lead into a memory for later on in the game. They're opposite of what the little lights that you collect that help you make bridges. That's separate. I did not know anything of that. I was so wrapped up to playing the game and the platforming and seeing what this game is going to reveal. I didn't even think about achievements and stuff like that at all.
Ed, I think I'm with you on this. I think I just let it wash over me like a poem or something like that. I didn't even realize that there was a mechanic going on like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to derail that, but it was very,
it's
very
important.
interesting.
I think it's good to bring up.
Right, welcome to Talk the Walk.
Yeah. But yeah, the desert area was a great first area for me. Now that we're thinking about anger and red, I guess that makes a lot of sense. It was a great introduction to the game mechanics. I think you work on unlocking heavy, which is where I think it's the Y button, you turn into a heavy block, which will protect you from the gusts of wind. I really appreciate the overall simplicity of the level, still breathtakingly beautiful, and just kind of eases you into how you use your special skills to platform your way across. That's kind of like all I really have to say on this level. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that.
Yeah, I can actually piggyback off of that. There's I thought the way that the mechanic of heavy was introduced, I thought it was really cool because you are affected. You kind of see as you're walking. You see some windmills in the back, and you're starting to. They very much go to the Miyamoto school of level design here with this game, where they're definitely introducing the elements piece by piece to you, and then ramping it up and layering them on top of each other. But the thing that's kind of cool about Gris, and I'll get back to my point, but the thing that's cool about Gris is that every single one of those mechanics, we're adding a level on. So you see the wind, then the wind affects Gris, and she blows back. All of those layerings are emotional statements as far as I'm concerned. And so you learn how to be heavy like a block. And when you first learn it, you're like, this is, if I may, you're kind of like, this is ugly, this is odd, this is strange. And you realize that you can plop down on the ground and be heavy enough so that the wind doesn't push you. All right, cool. So that's like, for me, that's a metaphor for dealing with the things that come to you in the world. At least step one, when you're at your lowest and you're at your weakest, at least you can be strong enough to weather the things that come at you. And that's what the wind was for me. And then you start to realize that you can kind of work with the wind almost, and you can find these spots, these moments to be safe. And so sometimes for me, that's like taking it day by day, and you're just going from day to day and getting through and just slowly trying to find yourself again and become stronger and stronger. And then the coolest thing with heavy is that at a certain point, you don't really use it as an attack, but you start to realize that you can use heavy as a tool, and it goes from being a passive situation, mildly passive because you're still choosing to do it to protect yourself from the wind, but now you can use it as a tool to move forward. So now heavy isn't just to create a shell. Heavy now is to make a choice to become stronger and find more things and move on. And I think that that's not only is that wonderful level design where we introduce that there's going to be wind, we show what the wind does to you, we show that you realize that you can weather the wind, I guess you could say. And then when you think that that's maybe the only thing you use that mechanic for, later on you realize that you can use that mechanic to progress and move forward and to take action in your environment. And I think that's cool. I think this just happens over and over in this game as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. Celeste, what did you think of the red area, the anger?
Oh gosh, exactly what David was saying. There's a poem by Robert Frost called Out Out. I don't know if you all remember that one. And it's beautiful but depressing. A young boy injures himself with a saw and he ends up dying. And the end of the poem, I think it's up to interpretation. It's something like the people who witnessed it they went about their day or they went about their lives because they were not the ones dead. And it seems kind of like, oh, we're nonchalant about this boy's passing. But at the same time, it kind of reminds you, the wind reminds me, it's what David was saying. Life is going on. You still have to go to work. If you have children, you have to address your children. You have to address your duties. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of form this shield, this rock. You become like stone to get through the day. And I mean, I think almost everybody has experienced that, whether you're dealing with a death, the end of a friendship, the end of a job, anything, any horrible thing, sad thing that's happened in your life. And I thought that was very beautiful. And I love that color red in that section.
Yeah, it's just I like the different shades of red. Like sometimes the red would get darker, like it's in, or it would, when you get higher up, it gets to this pinkish color. But sometimes when you're just like, what I love about the wind part, David, and all the guys that you mentioned it, is that you don't have the block part yet. And the wind is blowing, so you have to hide behind certain things. And then,
yes, you're right. Thank you for bringing that up, Ed. I totally forgot about that. You don't get the shield yet, and you just have to hide in the world. Oh, yes, that's a wonderful step.
Yeah, so just now thinking about it in this conversation, just like she's hiding between things to hide her anger and stuff. She know that, it kind of feels like it's getting built up, but she gets to a point where when she does turn into the block power, she has to face it. She has to face her anger and everything. And when you get to the end of it, there's a certain windmill section, this big windmill that you have to get through. So you platform all the way up, and then you just it's one part where you have to turn into the block and drop all the way to the bottom to match the little connection so the windmill could rise up. And it's kind of like you had to address. It feels like Gris had to address her anger to rise up above from it and be like, you know what, I got to get past this anger. I cannot be upset and everything, because everybody, when you get to the next part, it turns green, and she gets to where we see part of the face still broken off, but she lets it in her hand, and she once again starts singing in a sense, or not singing, but she unleashes and it turns to green. So it's kind of like this nature kind of thing. And once again, you get to a point where you're sliding down to the next section. And this is probably my favorite part of the game. You are in this forest area where the trees are now green, and you still got the background of red and blacks going on. So it's a mixture of, still some anger, but kind of some relief in a sense. And it turns out that you meet a friend who loves apples. And it's just like, oh my goodness, I love how they played around with color in this game with the red and the green to make apples, and like he's your buddy. David, I'm gonna start with you. What did you think of this green area?
I also think the green area was a highlight for me. I remember enjoying my time in the green, I guess you could say. But I wanna circle back real quick. So for me, when I was experiencing Gris, red didn't trigger as anger for me. My interpretation was that it was pain. I was thinking red and blood and pain and all that kind of stuff, and I didn't necessarily interpret it as rage or anger. I think it's cool if it is anger. I think maybe they're even pretty similar, the pain and all of that. But when I hit green, then you started realizing, so when you first get red, I don't know if you fully know you're going to be getting all the colors back. I mean, at least I didn't. I just got, you unlocked red, and then you get the title screen. And so you're kind of like, okay, maybe this is something where I'm going to be unlocking more colors. But when you hit green, that's the first time in the game, at least it was for me, where I thought like, okay, I'm building. I'm putting myself back together. I'm rebuilding all these parts of my subconscious and my emotions. And slowly but surely, there's going to be more color in the world, and the picture will be fuller. The thing that's really cool is that, so if red was anger, I'm totally for it. I think the block, the stomping, maybe there's a bit of an anger metaphor there. For me, it was hiding from the pain. But nevertheless, green was cool because if it was emotional for me to receive green, to find green, and then to go into this forest area, which makes perfect sense that each color is kind of, so when we think about typical level design, let's just say in a Mario game or any platformer, you've got your ice levels, you've got your desert levels, you've got your forest levels, you've got your water levels. There are certain tropes in video games that happen, and there's nothing wrong with that. What happens with Gris is we unlock green. It seems to be the most appropriate color next. There's a little bit of life coming back. It's literally growth. Trees are starting to happen as we move through this level. And so not only are we embracing a video game trope by having it be like the forest area, at the same time, metaphorically, I think it fits very well. I also agree with you that it was very smart and convenient that now we have red and green, and they kind of make brown for some of the tree trunks and stuff like that, but they also make this apple. You have this relationship with a couple characters, which you actually meet a few of them just walking around, and then one does befriend you. I remember being very pleasant in this area, and we have a little bit of isn't this the area where the trees are kind of growing and shrinking and regrowing and shrinking? So you have just spot on level mechanics or side scroll mechanics, but at the same time, for me, it was emotional. It was the first time in the game where you kind of go, oh, good gracious, okay, I'm building. I you know what? It's just the beginning. It's just a seed, but I can get there. It's like what I remember feeling in that part of the game.
All right. What about you, Celeste?
It was so peaceful. It's such a tranquil level in this game. It feels like peace. I is this considered bargaining in the 5 stages of grief? Would this be the bargaining stage?
I believe so, yes.
And I know that I've read before that the 5 stages of grief, they don't always happen in that order. You can fluctuate, and so I'm not sure if it's a little bit of acceptance, a little bit of waking up to reality, but also a little bit of bargaining. I kind of wonder if the little critter that you befriend and give apples to, if that, I was kind of thinking that had something to do with bargaining. Like, hey, I'll help you out if you can make me feel better or make life better again. Can you please get me through this? And I love Forest. I don't really get to visit them very often. I'm kind of terrified of Lyme disease and ticks, but
I share the same fear.
Thank you. And I just love forest levels in video games because forest might seem kind of creepy in a horror movie, but to me they kind of symbolize hope and infinite possibilities, that it doesn't matter which path you take, you're going to enjoy the journey. So I really love the green level.
Celeste, please, if I could interject for a second, you gave me a new thought here as you were talking, and you helped me realize that the relationship that Gris has with the little forest character that she ends up creating a relationship with, I think there's also something there where, because really for me, Gris was a journey from being passive to being active, to taking control of your emotions and your life. And I don't know if I experienced the stages of grief as much, but that's what's great about this game. But this is the first moment where, okay, fine, I spoke about you feel growth because of the green and the literal growth and all that kind of stuff. But this is the first time where, even though it's baby steps, even though it's just an apple or just a few things, Gris can actively improve someone else's life. Just in a small way. She's not saving the world or saving the universe, but she's helping that character get what that character wants and needs. And of course, there's all the level mechanics that we can discuss, but you helped me just now realize that I think that's the first time I spoke about the stomp becoming active. Well, now Gris can actively affect someone else's life, even in a tiny way. And that's cool. That's the beginning of rebuilding yourself, you know?
That's beautiful. That is.
Oh.
Oh, I love that.
Stephanie, what did
Steph. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Stephanie, what was the green? What you think of the green area?
Yeah, that forest was probably one of my favorites for multiple reasons. First, touching on like all the artistic style that was alluded to earlier. You know, anytime I do coloring or my son colors, when you put red and green together, it's just an eyesore. It's horrible. But because it's more of a watercolor palette, and Ed, you mentioned earlier with red, there's various shades of the color. It actually blended together real well. Because again, when I think red and green, I either think Christmas or it's a horrible combination. So, you know, that artistically, music's great throughout. I'll agree with David. Is for gameplay mechanics, which I'll have a lot to say more on later. But the forest had my favorite type of mechanics. Like I love the trees that, you know, open and close. Some open and close based on when you jump or how many times you jump. So that was a very cool, unique puzzle. It was challenging enough, but not too challenging for really terrible gamers like myself. Like it was not bad. I like the little underground levels where you get to see the creatures. There's other creatures that you don't necessarily interact with directly, but they'll chirp and they'll peep, and then they might scurry away when you get too close. It just makes the environment living and breathing and full of life, kind of like Ori and the Blind Forest, where the environment is alive. And then I definitely don't have to get too much into this if we'll address this next, but I appreciated the first quote-unquote boss, but not boss by the end, which is that black bird. But
yes.
I'll pause there in case we want to, you know.
Yeah, we could.
Well, I wanted to make one more comment about the colors, Steph. When you were speaking there, you helped me think of something too. So in you know the light spectrum, red is the easiest color for humans to see, at least. And
yep.
so that's red is oftentimes that's like why we have red stop signs. It's the easiest color for our eyes to detect. However, in color theory, green is the most calming color. That's why there's like the green room in a theater or in a television studio where the performers wait is literally always painted green. That's not an exaggeration. I've been in a few of them, and it's to help people relax and feel calm before they go out on stage or whatever. So now we have the easiest color to see, which was the first, even though it's a it's a passionate color, and now we have the color that's most calming. And I agree that when red and green get mixed in weird ways, it can be pretty ugly. But at least in this relationship, we have easiest to deal with and most calming at this point.
Yes. What I kind of liked about it, I mentioned a little helper that you get, apples and stuff. Is that he's kind of start mimicking you. So he's kind of now looking at you like you're a mother. That's what I got from it. And it was just like, oh, wow, this is, because she's feeding him or she's rewarding him. He's just like, hey, you're like a mom to me, so I'm going to mimic you and help you out. Because there are parts that he does help you out. And when he gets the last apple, he hops down and you go in this underground tunnel where rest of the people that look like him, these squares. And then you get up to a point and he gives you your next ability, which allows you to turn into a bird. And allows you to double jump and float. So that's when we get into while you're breaking pots and stuff and everything. Sometimes you'll see some red birds or red butterflies. But then there's a part that it gets dark, and it's this big red bird who is just like, he's the antagonist, or it is the antagonist, I should say. I can't say he. It is the antagonist of the game. That you really just like, what? Wait, I passed through some blacks, in the beginning of the game. Did that form this kind of bird thing? But even though there's still black stuff around here to make, to play around with the shading with it. And it was just amazing to see that, and the bird, like we said, you cannot fail in this game. You cannot die. You just blow you to the other side, and you keep going up, and you sometimes would use his air that he's screaming at you to help you get to other platforms until you get to the next part. What did you guys think about that, Celeste?
So I always like looking up symbolism with animals and colors. So I looked up what does a blackbird symbolize, and this is from whatismyspiritanimal.com. Death, change, and mystery.
Ooh.
So whenever the bird appeared and started shrieking at me, it kind of reminded me again how you're slowly, gradually returning to normalcy, and then this disruptive thought appears. You remember the cause of your pain. You remember something bad that happened to you. It's kind of like I've been through hard times, and it's usually, for me, it would be at night when my mind is slowing down, and that's when the sad thoughts or anger would enter my mind when I don't have distractions. So that's what the blackbird reminded me of, that, hey, the pain is still there, and it's going to come when you least expect it.
Ooh, did not even think about that. Wow. See, this is the thing about Talk the Walk. So people will bring so many theories and notes and similarities and research and stuff that I'm blown. Did not know anything about that. That blows my, and that makes the level, I think that makes games even more deeper and the narrative more serious and, impactful and everything. Oh, wow, now I want to just sit on that.
Ed, and also I think the speaking about the black bird, we shouldn't forget that that a little bit before the bird appears, Gris does her stomp and falls into basically a little mirror puddle.
Yes,
and you might recall that by doing a few stomps, it weird little tiny little blackbirds come out in this mirror world, and that's actually the source of they eventually form together to create this entity, this black entity, this black inky entity, which in this case manifests as a big huge bird that can roar. So I mean, in many ways, I think it's fairly clear that this inky black antagonist is the subconscious, or the swing of the pendulum of, even though we're going through a journey where we're rebuilding ourselves and making choices and becoming stronger, there are times, like Celeste was speaking to, where you can regress, or you can fall back a little bit and something can come back and trigger and attack you, and you have to deal with it. And the idea that, I think it was very well done, where we have this area of I don't know what to call it. I call it a puddle, but it's not a puddle. But this mirror area,
yes.
It was Gris falls down, and you don't really know what to do. There's actually nothing you can do except stomp. And after you stomp a few times, you notice a few more birds come out, and then they finally form up and like help you move on. But speaking to the bird boss battle in quotes, that was a very moving moment for me. That's when I really like clicked in. That's when I dialed in and said, okay, Gris doing something really special and really cool. Because again, we were kind of using, okay, so the bird would chase you and scream at you if you got too close. And so you've already learned how you can protect yourself from wind, so you build your shield. And then eventually what happened, so I thought maybe we'd just be climbing the tower shielding. Okay, every time the bird squeals at me, I'll protect myself from my subconscious, from my inner demons. I'll protect myself, and that's the metaphor that's happening in this tower right now as we go up. But then it gets awesome, because at a certain point, you realize that you can use the bird's scream, in other words, the bird's wind, to help you jump to other platforms to continue to traverse. And that was so beautiful to me. That was the moment where that's, like I said, where I was like, all right, Gris got it going on, because you're not only then are you saying, okay, I can protect myself from my inner demons. I'll just call them inner demons for the sake of this conversation. I'll protect myself from my inner demons. Cool. But then you say, you know what? I'm going to accept them and allow them to also fuel me, but not like Gris does not scream back. It's not about attacking your inner demons. It's saying, okay, I'm going to take them. I'm going to have them be a part of me. And also now, in some ways, even though it's weird, I can use some of this to get to new areas. And I was touched at this part of the game. I really was.
It kind of feels like every time you got closer to the end of that section, you were overcoming. And becoming an overcomer, because the confidence that you was getting, you were able to accept it. And yes, you are releasing a new color when Gris goes up in the air, but you know, you are going through this battle, you're going through this trial, and it's a mental thing that, you know, you are on this journey with. And so we're gonna hop into the blue, because I think this is my second least favorite part of the game compared to the following section. So, you get up in the air, you meet the statue again, and you kind of see that the face is a little bit, you know, almost there. You see the lips, but you don't see the actual eyes and everything. You release this blue and you fall down, like, you know, once again, you slide down and you fall into water. So now the background is blue with a little bit of green, a little bit red here. And as you completely go forward, you kind of get into this icy, dark cave area. And so you're playing around with water and ice. And the power that you get in this one is to swim around. Okay, so this is the part I didn't like, because of the way that you try to swim around and jump in, like move and stuff. It gets to a point where there's a lot of puzzles that you're trying to get into to get stuff, and you can't get through. And I think this is, for some people, the connection to help them understand. This is the water dungeons of The Legend of Zelda for some people, where it's the most frustrating thing because it takes so long to get through. It's not poorly designed or anything, but it was just like, I think just the freedom that I was having with the green and red section, it kind of felt like it got taken away when I had to deal with this ice section.
Well, I do want to say, Ed, real quick, that this is the area of the game that feels the most like a quote-unquote Metroidvania. This is it's the most concealed. It's very, how am I going to get through this slightly large puzzle, the moment-to-moment puzzles. And I can see how that could be a little frustrating.
Yeah, so, David, what did you think of this blue part, or this blue section?
So, I loved it. I really enjoy. So I played Gris. When I play a 2D indie game, if I'm able to play it with the digital, the up, down, left, right, the 8 directions, I usually play with the digital. I don't really like the analog stick. Though obviously with this swimming area, a little bit like I think Rayman Legends did this, you can swim in 360 degrees if you use the analog stick. So I was finding myself using the digital controls to walk around, run around. I'd jump in the water and I'd quickly just switch my thumb over to analog so that I could swim really smoothly. I do think there were platform challenges in this part. I was less affected by metaphor in this area of the game. I think there was some nice stuff, but this was a very technical part of the game, in my opinion. I think we're also dealing with, at a certain point, you get a little bit of like altered gravity. There's a little bit of Mario Galaxy going on in there where you're jumping and then the gravity changes and you can pull around and move around. And I think coming off of the emotions that I felt after the bird boss battle, I didn't mind something that was a little bit more technical, a little bit more even spooky sometimes. I was fine with this area, but I found myself clicking more into I'm playing a game now and I'm going to execute these game mechanics than I did having like an emotional experience. Because if I could if I could jump back to the bird battle for a second, you can't perish in that boss battle. In fact, it's quite clear that for the most part you can't even really go backwards. You're almost just executing triggers for a quick time event, but it is a very important thing that you're doing. And you're just embracing those emotions as you're going. This area is the opposite of that. This area is technical, is skill based, and for that though, I mean, I loved it. I love Metroid games, and I just kind of found myself having less emotions but more execution in this area.
Okay, Stephanie, what did you think of this blue area?
I did not swim around thinking, all right, this is going to be the water level and I'm going to hate it, like I have traditionally in the past every time I encounter a water level. In fact, I found it very serene. Like I like, hitting the swim button, I do a little twirl and whatever. But unfortunately, and it's not because it's actually there's water in it. Unfortunately, I think it coincidentally just really was a challenge for me. Again, I'm not the best at video games. That the ice portion, I didn't even realize that you created an ice copy of yourself. I was like, what is that ping, boom noise? Like every couple seconds, like what the heck is that? I'll admit, I had to look it up. I'm like, I know I need to get up there. How am I going to do it? And why do I still keep hearing that stupid noise? And then I realized, oh, okay. And also, there's a part more towards the latter half of the area where it's like this above ground and underground building, this structure. And I had a very hard time figuring out what columns I could pass through versus what columns I couldn't. And I'll admit, it got very frustrating, and I had to swim around and go. And I had to cycle back around that area 4 or 5 times because I saw a memento and I had to get it. If I see it, I'm like, I'm not gonna leave this level until I find it. And I just kept bumping into the walls, driving me nuts. So
Celeste,
I don't know if that was just me.
Oh no, I think that was me too. Celeste, what did you think of the blue area?
Blue is such a soothing color as well. I'm guessing this is the depression part of the 5 stages of grief. And I love water ice levels because they're very serene. They usually have very beautiful, calming music, kind of like Donkey Kong Country 2. I think it's in a snowbound lane is the name of the song, and those levels. And I was frustrated with the little ice creation as well. I had to look up, how do I get this scale to work? I did use a guide for this game for some parts, but I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, Ed, when I mention the next animal that appears. Is that
go ahead.
Too soon?
Go ahead.
A turtle appears and swims to the depths below. And of course I had to look up, what does a turtle symbolize? The protection, healing, and tranquility from uniguide.com.
Ooh.
Well, and in many ways, you kind of create that turtle by collecting the little dots and everything, and then the turtle comes to be and brings you down really deep. You're absolutely right. But I also remember that turtle feeling... I mean, I felt warmth. I felt taken care of. It was weird.
You're protected.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Well, I mean, there it is. There it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, so if that's what a turtle means, what does an eel mean?
An eel, according to HEP6.com, the ability to survive come what may. I guess resilience, but also now we're dealing with that eel is the antagonist, but we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes. No,
that's okay.
That's fine, because we're getting to where I think this is the most action that happens in the game, where you're being chased and you hear the music. That music and that whole section just it's wonders. Belendis is the artist who has worked on it, who did the music for this, and there is a behind the scenes where you guys get to watch how they designed the game and actually hear from him on how he created the soundtrack. And I was just like, okay, I'm getting chased. I gotta keep up. I gotta keep doing. And it's just such adrenaline going through this whole section and everything while listening to this music. But eventually you come out of it, you survive, and at the top you are into the fourth to last section. I kind of consider it like the finale of the game, where you now have all the colors. You have it's nighttime. You see the stars. You have the blues, the greens, the reds, the pink, the yellows. One more thing before we move on in the blue. I kind of like how it was dark, and if you sometimes hit the ground or hit something, the little trees that you see and the green, they're like become almost like as lamps. The yellow that brights up the place.
Yeah.
That was so nice. That's so cool.
It reminds me of Fantasia by Disney.
Yes.
If you guys remember that show, it reminds me of some of the... I think there's an underwater scene where this little goldfish is swimming around in different sections light up.
I think so. And I think there's... speaking about the eel, because the eel is maybe the second boss battle. They're not really boss battles, but they're almost like boss experiences. Yes. But anyway, the eel, if I remember correctly, that you do kind of somehow there is a graphical representation where you understand that the bird that you experienced previously in the game, this blob of black ink and unhealthiness, turns into the eel, and the eel starts chasing you.
Yes.
And it's really cool to see that. So it's very clear that what you're dealing with isn't just many monsters. It is the one monster that came out of you, and it's morphing and becoming more aggressive and all of that. And I remember the eel chase was very impactful for me. It's pretty clear. So you remember the magic carpet ride on the Super Nintendo Aladdin game? You know?
Oh yeah.
And it's pretty technical, and you can definitely mess up on that carpet ride level. It can actually get pretty intense towards the end. As I was doing the eel chase, which is very vertical for a while, and then it kind of switches over and it becomes a little bit like that magic carpet ride race, it's pretty clear while you're doing it. If you kind of take a second and look at it, you're like, oh, I can't really die here. I think I'm just kind of experiencing this. You can move around and all of that. But the first time that it happened to me, I was in it. I was like, move, Gris, you can do it. Go, Gris. A button. You know, I'm trying to swim. And the thing's snapping at you and stomping. The eel, the black ink eel is trying to get you and grab you. And for me, during that chase scene, I was, the way that I was affected emotionally was I thought, I just recently spoke about how like the water area is very technical and it's a lot of puzzle solving and maybe even a bit monotonous at times. I think there's a lot of interesting things going on there, but coming out of, let me close my window here for a second. We got a dog in the alley. There we go. So having the eel come out of nowhere. So basically the metaphor for me there was the underwater area is, okay, I've grown a little bit from the green area. I've helped a few people. I at least can function. And now I'm going to go function. Now I'm going to go solve a couple puzzles. And, you build, quote unquote, the turtle, which is your house. And the turtle brings you to a place where you feel safe. And then, bam, out of nowhere, you get hit with that thing that was lurking in the background that you almost forgot. You didn't even know if it was going to come back. Maybe the bird is gone, but then you realize that it's there and it's back and it's bigger and badder than it was when it was the bird. And it doesn't actually destroy too much, but you persevere. You persevere and you move forward and you run for your life.
It made me jump the second time he appeared. Not the first time he was the eel, kept chasing you, but after you I was talking about the trees turning into lamps and stuff, showing the light. You doing that little section, and next thing you know, bah! He gonna come get you, and I was trying to control. I was just unexpected, literally unexpected, and I think that was just man. that was a jump scare for me. I have never jump scared in games besides like Resident Evil when the dog jumped through the window the first time.
Maybe the dogs represent our anger and grief in Resident Evil.
Well, in many ways, with that jump scare, you've gotten to a point where you feel like I've overcome a certain amount. I'm just going about my tasks, and it is for me an example of how you can come home from work or whatever, have a day where all of a sudden you just get hit again, and you don't know why, and you got to deal with it. So that jump scare also still is a metaphor, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the turtles rescue you and take you to the next section. When you go,
yeah, that's right. That's right.
That moment right there. If I was a very emotional person, I probably would have just put the controller down and just cried.
I mean, I teared up at this point. I remember
because it was just like like you said, Celeste. It has that Fantasia kind of feeling to it. Like it really was a Disney experience with that. I would have said a Studio Ghibli, but Studio Ghibli, they have their way of magical realism is kind of like very different. So we get into the next section, and it's kind of like I said, we have all the colors. In this section, you kind of get your voice back, but you also are doing different kind of forms of platforming. So when you sing, it opens up these yellow these pink plants that you could jump on and everything. And when you hit a certain line in the level, you turn upside down. So kind of like Super Mario Galaxy. If anyone who played Mega Man X5, there's parts where you could jump at and you'll like go up in the sky, and so you're upside down during the platforming. It's kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ed. I think I misremembered that gravity part to be part of the water area. But anyway.
No, that's completely fine. So we're at the final part. I guess this is nighttime, I'm gonna say. I put it down as yellow because I felt like that was like kind of the next color, and you just see these beautiful plants and these beautiful outlines of this world. Like there's a balance in everything. Before we get into the ending, so Celeste, what did you think of this section?
It's very celestial. It's beautiful. I love the stars. I love the colors. I love the columns. It had a very Grecian Roman look to it with the plants and the columns. It frustrated me though because I struggled with the part where you flip and you go to the other side.
Yeah.
And I was trying to reach certain things, and I actually had to get my boyfriend to help me with some parts. Like, I'm not jumping right. I don't know what I'm doing. Here's the controller. Please help me because I'm about to scream.
Yeah, as beautiful as it was, this was the most frustrating part of the whole game to me.
Maybe it was intentional. I wouldn't be surprised.
Was she flipping emotions? I do not know. I just don't like that platforming in this thing because it's just like... why? Once again, I was just like, this game is beautiful. It has a great flow, but why this? Why is this?
Well, I think it's kind of it's a standard progression of skill requirements. You know what I mean? Like we've learned about the swimming. Now we introduce the gravity. Then they do the gravity and the swimming and your jumping and all of that kind of stuff. I do think that it was the most challenging part of the game as well. I don't recall being frustrated, but there were times those jumps were difficult. The one thing that I remember that was very exciting was getting the voice back, because that was for me. I didn't know anything about this game when I played it. I already said that, but I didn't realize that the X button or whatever it was, the try to sing button, which is there for 60% of the game before you even use it, and you start to forget about it, which is, I think, even that's part of the metaphor. Even that's part of, you're supposed to forget about that button. Oh, that's the button that doesn't do anything. And then you realize, wait a second, that's the button that makes me me. That's the button that makes me be special. The one thing that I can give to the world is this button that I couldn't do this whole time because I was broken, because I went through challenging things, because I just went through life and rebuilt myself, and then I also survived like the bad things coming in again, and now I've gotten to a place where I can be the reason I am me. Oh, so cool.
Yes. and you kind of see you see the actual face of the person that you have run into. We're going to get into that a little bit. Stephanie, what did you think of this yellow/nighttime portion of the game?
So it all came together for me color-wise because we've had red, green, blue, yellow, and it dawned on me those are the 4 primary colors.
Yes.
So it kind of, creates all the other colors and all that, happy, fun stuff. The voice, getting the voice back and being able to transform all the flowers, the peacocks, I think, the birds that were there, really was a saving grace because by that point in the game, I was frustrated with some of the things, but being able to utilize that voice and change the environment was very refreshing for me. And so it motivated me to keep going. I had a love-hate relationship with the kind of upside-down mechanic because at first I was getting like Stone Tower vibes from Majora's Mask. But at the same time, I'm like, this is brilliant, though. I like the execution of it,
Yes. I kind of like the little... it's not an octopus. It's some kind of robot thing that you just stand on and then like watch you do part of the thing.
Yeah.
I thought that was like really
the rock thing with the legs?
Yeah.
Like spider kind of?
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. So we're at close to the end of the game. So spoiler alert, if anyone, we are going to talk about the ending, but we're going to also talk about the secret ending before it actually leads to the game. So, if you have not...
You should see David's face.
Secret ending.
So...
Well, yeah.
I don't know.
Who collected all the mementos real quick?
Yes, that's what it is.
Okay.
So, would you collect all the mementos?
I have no idea if I collected them all or not.
I know I didn't. I need to go back.
I've played this game twice. I have no idea.
So, if you could collect all the mementos, and there are like walkthroughs and strategy guides to help anyone who wants to do that, you get to a point where it's this big circle and you use your voice. And when you sing, it kind of opens up into a moonlight. This is separate from the moonlight that you do when you sing. And it shows like the statue and her around the big moon. That was a nice shot right there. It's separate from that. It kind of tells you why Gris fell into depression. She kind of has a mother/sister. It doesn't tell you how their relationship is, but it looks like someone older than her that she was very close to. And at this point, she gives you this little white dot or white light that follows you around. So when you realize that these white dots are following you around to make bridges, it's because of that. It seems that Gris has lost this person and it put her into this level of grief into it. So when you get to the end, you're about to get to the ending, and the darkness comes back for one last time, and it yells at you, and it shows you the face of Gris, and it yells at you, and it swallows you up, and you just fall down into it. When you get to it, you're back to the black and white state. There are some color parts here and there. As you start jumping up and get further into the thing, you start singing, and while you are singing, the pieces are coming back so it's representing kind of her memories of the person that she lost. And while that is happening, the darkness is trying to come up and swallow you. And Gris is still singing, she's singing, and the darkness actually starts covering you and the screen goes black. But then you start hearing harmony of it. So Gris and the statue or the memory of that person starts singing along with Gris, and it destroys the darkness. And at this point, Gris runs to it, and like kisses it and hugs it, and you just see this water fall down from the statue. The statue pushes you down, or actually push you up to the end part where you jump and skip, because it opens up its eyes to see you and everything. And you're walking up, and you're going into the clouds, and the game fades out to darkness as the end, and it goes into the credits. Emotional.
Good stuff.
That's right.
Emotional. Stephanie,
Emotional.
start it off.
I completely missed. I interpreted this so differently. I love the fact that there is some narrative about it's a person who's been lost in Gris' life. I think for me, because it is fairly abstract, and I'm not trying to say it's not that story. I believe that's accurate. Everyone can look at art differently, but I was seeing the rebuilding of the statues and the characters and the environment as Gris confronting alternate versions of herself, and the love with this character. I saw that as Gris finding another version of her entity, and then accepting that and finding that self-love again is how I interpreted all of this, which is fine and great. So for me, it was really about if you can let that evil take over, you can let that defeat take over, and Gris falls all the way down. But this time Gris has already rebuilt herself. She has the tools she needs. She has the skills she needs, literally, to use her voice, to use the thing that makes her her, to rebuild and get back to the top. And my interpretation was that as that was happening, Gris was willing to accept portions or alternate identities of herself that she maybe was ignoring or forgetting or pushing away, so that she could find her own self-love and build herself back. That's how I interpreted that area. It was very nice, and I was crying. But I also really like that it's this story about finding loss as well.
Well, it didn't hit me until I realized that when I started watching other people analyze this game and paying attention to the red area. That's why you do not see the faces in the background. That's why you see the person that she's looking at is covering her face up, crying or being it looked like, I thought it was shame, but it was hiding the grief, because it feels like that person that Gris lost Gris, and it's that separation that caused it. So in Gris' mind or in her journey, that's why you are seeing broken pieces, that you're seeing the face hiding, and you don't actually get to see the face, I think, to the third section. That's why when that shot, like I mentioned, with this, when it faced out and it's this big goddess in Gris by that moon, that's when you kind of realize, oh, that's the connection there. Stephanie, what did you think about this portion?
Oh, it just made the game worthwhile, finishing it to completion. I did tear up when, she, kissed the statue and just all that stuff. I only looked up the additional ending after the fact, because I just wasn't able to collect all the mementos, because if you look at the hub where you bring all your stars to, I think they're little etched shapes and spots where you find the mementos, and I was at 3/4 or almost all the way done with the game. I noticed a ton were missing, so I got so mad at myself that I missed them, and I couldn't easily go back. So without knowing that ending, so to speak, when she disappeared in the stars, I'm like, wait, did she die and she's accepting her own death? That's one way I thought about it, but no, it was definitely a complete journey where we were walking through Gris' shoes, but also kind of made me think about the times that I went through the loss of a loved one, or a very bad breakup, or losing a friend because they moved. And what resonated the most was, it's true, as you make progress and bounce through various stages of grief or whatever, even when you're thinking that you're fine, there's always that very heavy darkness that's inside that can really just gotcha at any moment. So
yes. Celeste, what did you think of this section in the ending?
Oh gosh, I think I'm gonna piggyback off of what everyone said. I didn't know. Okay, so when I saw the statues, at the beginning, when I saw the statue covering its face, I thought, did something happen to Gris? Did someone attack her? I know this sounds very dark, but I thought, okay, did something really serious happen to her and she's trying to work through this? Did someone...
I thought that too, Celeste.
Okay, yeah. Did someone hurt her and she's trying to cope with the aftermath?
Essentially trauma.
Yeah.
Coping with trauma.
Exactly. And then there's a sarcophagus at the end as you're going up the star stairway. So I thought, okay, again, is that a metaphor for Gris herself? Did she lose someone? And I do a lot of research after these games, like Stephanie does, and I'm like, okay, what does this mean, and what did I miss? And there are multiple interpretations for this game. Some people go along with what David is saying, that it's all about growing into yourself and finding your identity, coping with trauma. A lot of people say what Eddie and Stephanie have said. It's you've lost a sister, a friend, a mother, aunt, whatever. And I don't know. I guess that secret ending, is that kind of solidifying it, or is that another metaphor?
Well, it's
What is the secret ending?
it's so you get this ending before you get the actual ending, because it's part of the level of the nighttime level. You'll get into the section, and if you got all the mementos, you could trigger it, and it's a small little cutscene, and then you can continue on with the game.
Could you tell me what happens? I don't recall if I maybe I got and I didn't know.
So when you get the mementos, when you get to that section, you will sing, and it opens it up, and you get teleported into this cutscene where Gris and the statue, maybe her mom or her sister or whatever, the statue is connected, showing them they were together, as friends, lovers, family, whatever. And the statue hands Gris the little light thing that you use to make the bridge and everything. And then after that, it goes back into the game. So it's just showing that Gris, the person that Gris was with, is who she lost. So whatever their connection was, their bond was, it was really strong, and she lost that bond when that person somehow maybe died or went away or whatever. And so Gris has made a statue of this person in her mind or whatever to her, as a memory. And because it's kind of like the story of her, that's why you don't see her in the beginning. That's why you only see the hand and the crack, because now Gris is dealing with grief. So probably before she died, she had the statue in her mind that, the strong will, strong bond. And now that she's gone, grief has came into her and is affecting her world.
Wow, Ed, that's so deep.
Yeah. So,
interesting.
Yeah. So I put it out there and I asked some people, what did they think of Gris? Should there be a sequel? Which we're gonna actually just like talk a little bit about, because me and my friend, we were talking about it, and I was just like, does this game need a sequel? Definitely with us watching the indie direct, I was just like, well, we don't know what they're showing. Maybe Gris 2 could be announced and everything. But we did have some feedback. So EXPcast said the music is both haunting and beautiful. Props to at Berlin's band for one of the best soundtracks. Grace Morales said, the music in Gris is so well done. It's such a relaxing and serene experience. However, I don't think that it is a game that needs a sequel. It's so strong as a standalone one-time thing. And Late to Gaming said, it's a fantastic game. I think everyone should play. It's beautiful in every way. Visual, music, gameplay, and story. So, I asked, I'm going to start with you, Celeste.
No.
Do you think Gris should have a sequel?
I think it's kind of like when you're painting something or you're writing something or doing any kind of creative passion project. At some point, you have to step back and say, "It's done. I'm not gonna add anything else. It's perfect the way it is." I think it would muddy it up too much. I'm not quite sure what the sequel could entail, because unless we see Gris thriving, but I think the way it ends is more impactful.
Okay. David, do you think Gris should get a sequel?
I think no. The quick answer is no. I don't think it should. I think Gris is a piece of interactive art that has game mechanics in it. I think it's beautiful. I have bought this game for other people, for them to just experience it the same way that you may want to share a good song with someone or something like that. And maybe like a good song, you don't really need another one of those songs. You can just listen to that song. And I think I would love to have I don't have this research in front of me at all. I would love to see if Nomad, I'd love to see what they do next. Let's put it that way. I think they should keep making games. I think that that they've got something going on here. I adore the art style. I'd love to see that art style return. But as far as the narrative or the experience of Gris, I don't think it needs a sequel. I think just play Gris again.
Stephanie, do you think Gris deserves a sequel?
So I think in a standard sense, probably not, just for all the reasons that maybe Celeste and David had said before. But it reminded me of an idea I had when I was younger, when I was thinking of all these books that I wanted to write, was have a series of either short stories or books where it surrounds a particular emotion. Mm-hmm. So one book will be about one emotion, then discovering another emotion. And I noticed that there are more and more games. I think it's still it's still growing, that address, mental well-being. Like I think we alluded to the game Celeste before as well. And many, many more. And I think that there could be such a benefit to having these games accessible even for the casual gamer, mm-hmm. Those that maybe aren't into games and maybe kind of use it for therapy. So, like, for example, it would be amazing that Gris could get a sequel in a sense that Nomada Studio could put out a game of similar type and structure, but explore another aspect or emotion of human nature. And in a sense, it could be a sequel like that. So not a direct sequel, but I would love more snippets, stories, interactive media that surround the human condition.
Okay.
Me too.
How about you, Ed?
So I was talking to my friend, and I really wanted a Gris sequel, but now talking to you guys, and I'm watching the end, and I'm agreeing with you guys. I don't think it needs a sequel. I think their follow-up should be able to explore more emotional, more mental, therapeutic games, because we don't have a lot of that in the gaming industry, and I think when we talk about narrative in games, people who praise, I keep saying this, people who praise God of War because they say that it has the best narrative don't understand narrative in games. It's always been here for a long time, and this is a game that has a very strong narrative that can not only speak to people but actually help people through grief and trauma and things like that. Another game I kind of want to recommend people play is Rhyme. This is
I haven't played that one yet. I know, I've seen it on the store or whatever, and I've been curious.
Play it on PS4 or Xbox. You can skip the Switch version. Or play it on PC.
I only have a Switch, but nevertheless.
if you want to play it on Switch, I think it's patched up where you can play. If anyone wants to experience, because Rhyme is a very emotional game, and you don't get the realization of what's going on to the ending, and I cannot spoil it at all. It's not a talk to walk kind of game. It's something that people should play, and then contact me to have a discussion, because you will have emotions. Trust me, you will have emotions.
Like Mariah Carey.
Yes. Yes. Rhyme is just a really good, and I think cool. Games like Rhyme, Papa and Yo, where there are these indie games that exploring this space. I think we need more of it, and I love to have stuff. I think that's why where we get to, because we are doing Life is Strange, that it's something that's going to speak to us, that we're going to be talking about and everything. Which, Celeste, I had to talk to you about Life is Strange, because I found some news from Corey, and I'm just like, I can't believe they're doing this. But we're gonna get to our final section. Should you talk Gris, or should you walk away from Gris? Talk or walk. So, I'm going to start with you, Stephanie. Should you talk Gris or walk away from Gris?
All right, so I'll be completely honest. As a whole, there were some things that I struggled in the game where I kind of wanted to put it down, and I struggled, admittedly. However, looking at it from an objective point of view, looking at all aspects, artwork, music, the message, I actually believe that people should talk, not walk from this game. I think it's a good enough experience. It's not terribly long, so if someone struggles a little bit with it like me, they'll still be able to get through it. I just feel like there's many benefits of playing this game, not just to play for entertainment, but to actually walk away and reflect about your own life experiences. So I am all for recommending people to play this and talk about it.
Celeste, do you want to talk the game or walk away from the game?
I think watercolor paintings are my favorite type of paintings, and it's beautiful. And this discussion has reinvigorated something within me about this game. I'm not gonna lie, the games that we've played for Talk the Walk, this one, I kept wanting it to be over because I struggled with some platforming aspects, and that's what frustrated me. I don't know if it's just because I'm not good at platformers and puzzle games, but whenever I play a game, I'm so interested in the story. I'm going to pick up every note. I'm going to explore every nook and cranny. I'm going to look for the symbolism. I'm going to look for graffiti. I want to understand the characters more and more. And Gris, I think, kind of, it's a marriage of that and platforming. Not action so much, maybe a little bit when you're being chased. I think people should play this. It's short enough to play. I don't think you're going to waste too much time. So I think people need to talk about it. I will say it is not my favorite game I've ever played. That doesn't mean there's something inherently wrong with it. But it's beautiful, and I love these types of conversations that get my gears turning.
Okay. David, should they talk Gris or walk away from Gris?
I think for me it's a talk. I think it's definitely a talk. I think talk about playing it and then talk about after you've played it, like we are here today. I was kind of thinking about this over the last couple minutes, and this analogy of Gris maybe being like a song, I think is actually pretty apt. The same way, like a song can be beautiful and have a narrative to it, and it can mean slightly different things for slightly different people. And to circle back on the sequel thing, like I don't want a Gris 2, but I'd really like another song from this artist. I really like this artist if we're going to use that kind of like way of thinking about it. I think people can and should play it. Like I said, I've bought it. I have purchased it for other people to play, just for them to experience it. I think that this is a work of art. It's a visual work of art. I think it has very smart and intelligent game design. I didn't struggle too much with the platforming, and I'm not amazing at platformers or anything like that. There were times where I remember the blinking ice part. I was definitely stuck. I did not do any strategy guides. I didn't try to play the game fast. I'd play it in chunks over the course of a couple weeks. I'd play it when I wanted to play it. I would experience that poem, if we're going to use that one, when I wanted to experience it and when I was emotionally ready to experience it. So like the challenge of some of the platforming elements for me, I didn't feel like a burning fire to move forward. I allowed myself to be in the moments that were challenging. And if I was stuck in an area, figuring out how to get out for me was an emotional metaphor for the challenges we have in our life, because we can't go to strategy guides in real life. I mean, maybe we can. I don't know. I don't want to get too deep into that. But for me, I think it's definitely a talk. It's definitely a play. I don't think it's particularly expensive. When the game is its weakest is when I'm only walking right. You know, there's a lot of games out there where you only walk right, and what the thing is to say that that's when it's at its weakest. It's still brilliant, because with Gris, when you're walking right and doing nothing else, it's for a reason. It's for an emotional reason. It's for a pacing reason. There's a reason why it takes a while to walk to a certain spot or look at a new spot. And the information that's being given to you, the story that's being given to you in the background, in the foreground, while you're walking right, is all part of the experience. So there was a moment in the early parts of the game where I thought, oh boy, is this going to be one of those where you really just walk right the whole time? And I realized quickly that they weren't parodying it, but they were using it as a storytelling mechanic, and I think that's great. So I think this game is pretty dang close to perfect for what it needs to be. It's like a short independent film. It's a piece of art in a gallery. I think for what it needs to be, it's not a book, it's not a novel. I think it's perfect.
So I think the game is definitely worth the play. I think it's definitely worth the talk. It has a strong opening, and I think there's this is the hard thing about it for me, like a negative aspect for me. I feel like the first two parts of the game is super strong, and then the last two parts it falls through. It gets weak. And I think it's like I agree with you, Celeste. The platforming becomes very problematic in that third and fourth section, because it gets frustrating. Sometimes you got to redo a lot of parts over and over, and it's not until you actually get to the end and you see how the game concludes that it brings you back into it. In a sense, yes, the turtle part, when you finally get out of that frustrating water part, you're like, yes, I'm close to the level at the end of the game. Then you realize you got this frustrating platforming that you got to deal with, and it's just like the balancing of the level design is what like kind of hinders the game for me. But if you persevere through everything, you get the collections, you check the mementos, you take time to recognize what the game is about, and you watch the ending by putting the controller down. If you feel that the game is emotional and it's making you cry, you kind of connect to why things are happening, it becomes even more worth the play and everything. And I think a lot of people have been recommending, hey, you need to play Gris, like, to get this emotional state and everything. I think your first playthrough might be 5 to 6 hours, depending if you're like trying to get everything and this is your first time not watching a playthrough, not reading no strategy guide or nothing like that. I think it's about 5 to 6 hours, and then once you know what to do, it becomes very shorter for it. But everybody, that has been our Talk the Walk. I want to thank David. I want to thank Stephanie. I want to thank Celeste. We're going to get quickly into some plugs. But first, I got to say, our next game is going to be Firewatch. So,
yes!
So, hopefully you guys will be able to play with Firewatch with us, because this is going to be my first time playing Firewatch. I've never played it, and I'm excited for this discussion. But before we get into that, Celeste, where can we find you?
I'm not emotionally ready for Firewatch, but yeah, I love Firewatch. I can't wait. You can find me on Twitter I'm at Fairy Crypt, and I'm also with David and Stephanie at Another Zelda podcast, and I also do interviews with different people from all walks of life for the 1v1 series with Boss Rush.
Yes. Stephanie, where can we find you?
Yes, you can find me writing for Another Zelda podcast, and then eventually an episode where I might make an appearance, coincidentally, on the 5 Stages of Grief with David for ACP in the future. I am also a senior writer / copy editor for Boss Rush Network. Every once in a while, I'll make a cameo on the family of podcasts there. But otherwise, you can find me on Twitter at Klimov, KLIMOV_author.
Yes. David, where can we find you?
It's true that when Steph was in town for the Video Game Summit, we realized that we had a morning available, and we were able to record Another Zelda podcast episode together. And it was about, I don't mind saying it, we did an episode about how Majora's Mask deals with grief, and it was a wonderful conversation.
Yes.
Parallel to this episode a little bit in some ways, how things are dealt with, but it was an absolute blast. It was great to speak with Steph in person and have an episode in person with her, and it was beautiful. I think that one's going to come out as the 6th episode of season 4, so that one's kind of in the can, but it'll come out in a couple months. It was wonderful, and you can find me at on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Raptor Paint. It's a super old handle. It was the origins were because I was joking with friends about a sequel to Mario Paint that was Jurassic Park themed. I won't get into it. It turned into Raptor Paint. And I'm living with it. It's been Raptor Paint for like 15 years, so I'm taking it. But anyway, Instagram and Twitter there. Otherwise, you can go to anotherzeldapodcast.com to find the show that we do. This was an absolute pleasure to see Steph and Celeste again. And then Ed, after meeting you in person about a month ago, I was even more excited to be in this episode today, and hopefully you and I can be recording something in person sometime soon too. I think.
Oh, just let me know. I'll take the trip down to the city. I know how to get there now.
Because you're not too far away. I think, right? Like we could conceivably get together.
Please make this happen.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we got. This is a season 4. I think we got to do this in season 4. I think we got to do it. Anyway, we'll deal with that off mic.
And you guys can find me on Twitter at @ThatRetroCode. You can check me out on Nintendo Pop Blog, Optional Opinion on SoundCloud, World War One Podcast, and other places here on Boss Rush Games, or Boss Rush Network. With that, everybody, have a great week. Have a great weekend. Whenever you hear this podcast. And as always, if you're going to walk the talk, make sure you talk the walk. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See ya.
The Talk the Walk series is a production of the Boss Rush network of podcasts. Visit bossrush.net to listen to our podcast and read our articles, game reviews, and more. You can also follow us on Twitter at Boss Rush Network to stay up to date with our content. Thank you for listening.